Special guest today on the Common Sense Club and the Scott Hennen Show is Mike Tokarz, who's chairman of the Tokarz Group, as well as the chair of New York-based MVC Capital and Walter Energy Corporation, and on the board of advisors for Pedigree Technologies, which, of course, you here in Fargo as well. Mike, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Tell us a little bit about how someone with as much experience as you do in the venture capital world and Wall Street ends up on the board of directors previously of Dakota Growers and now the board of advisors for Pedigree Technologies.
Well, as an investor in all kinds of opportunities, you search the world for opportunities that give returns to your money and other people's money that you invest. And Dakota Growers was a very successful investment for those that invested before us and along with us. And I met a number of people there who are generating business opportunities, and among others, Pedigree was an outstanding opportunity which we chose to invest in. Obviously,
the thirst for capital is pretty strong these days. So while you say obviously you're here as an investor, there must be more because there's a lot of investment opportunities, and yet you've chosen in a couple of cases North Dakota. Tell us a little bit about just getting to know North Dakotans and doing business here.
Well, North Dakota turns out to be my favorite state, along with a lot of others. Even though I'm a native Illinoisan and I live in New York today, you have to realize that your business is enveloped in the environment of the economics of your region, your state in particular. And one of the things that is absolutely crystal clear is that North Dakota is the top performing business discipline state in and of its own house. In other words, the state budget has a surplus. It's a very well-managed state, and that makes a good environment for business.
And I imagine you know our governor, since you obviously were on the board of directors of Dakota Growers.
Well, I do know Jack Dalrymple. He was a very effective chairman of the board of Dakota Growers, and as people know who invested in Dakota Growers, it gave a very nice return. They got a dividend along the way of substance, and they sold the company for a little over $18.50 a share. And I'm sure that those that received the cash for that are happy today. And it was a good investment for, as well, myself and our firm. And so Jack obviously is now governor, and he exemplifies those very disciplines that I mentioned earlier about making sure that you have not only a balanced budget, but you've got a little extra cushion and that you're disciplined.
Prior to the involvement in the companies I mentioned, including your Tokarz Group and MVC Capital and the Walter Energy Corporation, currently you were part of a 17-year tenure of a partner at KKR, one of the kind of legendary venture capital firms. And folks may remember that famous story, Barbarians at the Gate, which I do as well, the movie, the book, and everything else, and you played an integral role in that. How has Wall Street changed from those fast and loose days of the 80s and the early takeovers, would you say?
Well, it's changed a lot. For instance, coming in to have the interview today, they made me take off my barbarian helmet with the horns, so I didn't scare anybody coming in from Wall Street. Wall Street, was rough and ready back in those days, and that meant that we were buying companies with money from other people, pension plans and institutions, and gaining control of companies that we actually improved. There's some university studies that showed that leveraged buyouts and the barbarian kind of process was very beneficial for employees and the growth of businesses. And you can see on the Harvard website or University of Chicago, some of the business schools, how effective that's become. But what's happened recently is with the financial crisis, Wall Street is taking a hammering. First of all, some of the behaviors of some of the major firms, contributed to some of the difficulties associated with the crisis, and they're being punished. Some firms just didn't make it because they were too aggressive and too leveraged, like Lehman Brothers or Bear Stearns. And those that survive now, I think, are not only well-behaved, but focused on doing the right thing and not manufacturing product or other, exotic securities that at the end of the day don't have an economic base to them. So the over-exaggeration or over-complication, layers of securitization and so forth, are not now predominant on Wall Street as a product to sell to institutions.
So like there's a market correction from time to time, this was sort of a cleansing or a correction on Wall Street.
Absolutely. And it goes all the way around, as I'm sure people in North Dakota know. For instance, the mortgage crisis. The mortgage crisis was not because anything other than the standards to give someone a mortgage were relaxed, so much so that people who couldn't afford to have a mortgage actually got one, over leveraged, and then when things got tough, couldn't pay. And whether that's in Florida or other places where they overbuilt, here in North Dakota, things seem to be in pretty good balance to me.
Well, what's your take on the economy and where it is and where it's going?
Well, the U.S. economy is right now buffeted by a number of factors. Well, number one is the crisis hurt it, and it's still recovering. Obviously, with job unemployment being where it is, the average person, 1 out of 12 are not in position to be earning money these days because they don't have a job, and that hurts the overall economy because there's something called the velocity of money. When someone spends $1, 4.2 times it goes around the economy. That generates revenue for other people. They spend it, and revenue for other people. They spend it, and they have money. Along the way, it gets taxed. So now the municipalities and the states get tax revenues that would be greater if more people were working. So the economy is buffeted by the unemployment. It's buffeted by the fact that there is growth that we interrupted, and there's absorption of losses in financial instruments that the banks have substantially now accomplished. So I see that the economy will improve. I think the only other big headache that we have is the federal deficit. Unlike North Dakota, the federal government is way over its head, spending beyond its means, and spending is not even able to be controlled in some instances because of the various Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other payments that are entitlements that have a life of their own. So somehow, some way, we're going to have to get control of this if America is to be the great economic power that it's always been.
Does it get worse before it gets better, as some people believe?
If the federal government doesn't lock down and focus and face on the fact that we not only got to stop the growth of the deficit, but start to reduce it and reduce our debt outstanding, we're going to be overwhelmed by competitors. Take a simple example. We have, I forget, it's about $3.6 trillion in debt, and China has none. China has $2 trillion of our U.S. dollars. Well, what are they going to do with them? They're going to spend them, and we're going to be trying to pay back our debt. So, and they're number 2 now, economy in the world. And don't think for a moment they don't want to beat our brains out. So, but America has innovation. China doesn't innovate anything, really. They just copy and have done a wonderful job doing that and make things cheaper. But we're the leaders in innovation and technology, and that's why I'm invested in Pedigree here in Fargo, North Dakota, and interested in North Dakota because the business disciplines and the innovation is occurring here.
Speaking of which, what a great American story when you think about Alex Warner in his basement with an idea, starting what is now a growing company, attracting investment from Wall Street, as you say, and grown to almost 50 employees. Tell us the story of Pedigree Technologies and why you're excited about it.
I'm excited about it because Alex did create a very important software tool that's used by businesses, among other things, to track their equipment, to monitor, but through sensors, the efficacy of equipment that's being used in the oil patch or HVAC, which is the refrigeration and other units. And he did it in a way that it's sort of like sensors can be plugged into a software, and it's immediate and it's cheap and it's effective. So now people can manage their businesses, keep track of things like their trucks, keep track of things like the fuel in the tanks, when they need to be refilled. I think a very simple example I really like about what the technology can do is imagine a gas station that has a truck come by every week, whether or not it needs to be filled up, the tank in the ground. Well, now with his technology, they only have the truck come when it needs to. Maybe it's every 2 weeks, maybe it's twice a week, rather than some fixed schedule. And that saves money. It saves money on transportation, saves money on use and wear and tear on the equipment, and so on. And that's what technology is designed to do. And Pedigree and Alex Warner in his basement did a wonderful job of inventing a software that does just that. And it's just not for gas stations. The U.S. government's using it. The Navy is using it. So it's a phenomenal thing, and you got to give credit to people who are innovators, and that's what I seek out in the world is innovation.
It's often referred to as machine-to-machine technology. Why is that?
Well, because what happens is a machine, which is a sensor located out in a location, communicates with a computer, which is another machine, does the analysis and tracking, and provides data to any end user. For instance, the machine can take action based upon what the sensor says. They have, for instance, out in the oil patch, they have these mobile bathrooms. And these mobile bathrooms have water and chemicals in them in order to flush it. Well, they have a sensor to locate where they are, but they also have a sensor to tell you what the temperature is so they don't freeze, because they don't flush when it freezes. So they are able to monitor and ascertain which one has enough warmth or heat, whether it's electrically or otherwise provided, and prevent something from not working.
You've seen a lot of this technology, a lot of innovation. Obviously, have deals put in front of you all the time. How is this one unique? How is it different? How do you see it growing from here?
Well, this one here is efficient in the cost. When you have a sensor, all these different companies make sensors, and they have their own way to communicate the data from that sensor. What this technology does, it takes anybody's data, no matter how it's communicated, what kind of software, what kind of a communication language, and is able to assimilate it into something that's utilizable and deliverable to the end user in terms of information. That translation, just think of it, there's probably 150 languages in the world. Well, imagine what it takes to communicate to one another if you got 150 people in a room all speaking a different language. Well, what their technology does very simply is it is a translator, and it'll take all 156 and make it understood instantly. And that's what's really effective about it.
Does this have is this a global play? I mean, do you see this as having the kind of technology that could go to a much larger scale?
Well, that's why I'm here today. I'm here today to talk to them about expanding this to a much larger region in terms of sales. And now what's happening to the company is it's being contacted by major companies. And these major companies are looking for this kind of technology, and some to remarket it, some to use in their operations, and some to allow communication and assimilation of information from partners. And when you have something that's that effective and efficient, and again, if you use the language example, how hard is it to find somebody who can speak Swahili when you need them? Well, Pedigree Technologies can speak Swahili every day of the week and translate it into useful information for somebody who needs it now.
And of course, investment from sources such as yourself are what take companies like this and a good idea and bring them to a whole new level, right?
Well, yes, and I'm not the only investor. There are a number of North Dakotans who are investors who see this as well, and you have an opportunity here in the state to create growth. Yes, they have 15 employees, but if I were to project out, this is a growing business that's going to certainly keep the low unemployment rate in North Dakota lower.
Well, we're glad you're here and appreciate your trust and investment in a good local company, and also your expertise in helping them grow here.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks for having me with you today.